Well, hello there. My name is Adam Cook, and I'm very happy that you've joined me for this week's edition of Telile 24/7 because we're celebrating this week. Believe it or not, this is our 100th show. And we're going to share with you a lot of the features that you've come to expect since Telile 24/7 debuted 2.5 years ago. We're going to have interviews with the newsmakers of the day. I'll speak to Allan MacMaster, who is Nova Scotia's finance minister and deputy premier, and I'll also talk to the youth representative for Mulgrave Town Council, Victoria Cook, about her campaign to get a rainbow crosswalk painted in the town. You're also going to see highlights from Richmond Municipal Council's most recent Committee of the Whole meeting in Arichat, and we'll take you to Camp Rankin in Cape George, Richmond County, which has reopened for its 50th anniversary this summer after being shut down for the past 2 years due to COVID-19 restrictions. And of course, it wouldn't be Telile 24/7 if we didn't wrap things up with the Fast Five. You'll hear my foolish questions and our guests' surprising answers coming up at the end of the show. But we begin once again with the passing of Queen Elizabeth II and the impact of this death on the British Commonwealth, including here in Canada. Now, on Monday morning, 10 days of mourning in the United Kingdom wrapped up with the Queen's funeral and her committal service. But at the same time, members of Royal Canadian Legion Branch 43 in Port Hawkesbury were having a cenotaph ceremony for the Queen, and also marking the transition between Queen Elizabeth II and King Charles III, while taking a look at what being a member of the Commonwealth has meant for us here in Canada over the past 70 years. So let's take you to Reeve Street in Port Hawkesbury right now for the highlights of this service honoring the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. The mood was somber outside Branch 43 on Reeve Street in Port Hawkesbury as Legion members prepared to salute the memory of the only monarch that many of them have ever known and the only monarch that many of them have ever fought under. On this sunny and breezy Monday morning, as Royal Canadian Mounted Police led the funeral procession for Queen Elizabeth II an ocean away, the Red Surge was in full force leading this band of Legion members across Reeve Street and over to the Port Hawkesbury Veterans Memorial Park for a service at the Port Hawkesbury Cenotaph that reflected on Queen Elizabeth's role in setting up the Royal Canadian Legion in the first place.
The Royal Canadian Legion came to be in 1961 and was due to Her Majesty's consent to use this title. The Legion was founded in Winnipeg in 1925 as the Canadian Legion of the British Empire Services League, and was later incorporated by a special act of Parliament with its charter issued in 1926. The act was amended in 1961 after the Queen consented to the use of the prefix Royal. When Princess Elizabeth turned 18 in 1944, she joined the Auxiliary Territorial Service, ATS, the women's branch of the British Army. Later, she became Colonel-in-Chief of 16 British Army regiments and many Commonwealth units. As a member of the ATS, she was the first female of the royal family to be an active duty member of the British Armed Forces. The Queen was also the last surviving head of state to have served during the Second World War. As a World War II veteran, she was an army driver and a mechanic. The late Queen was a true role model of comportment and grace and will be fondly remembered.
In light of the Queen's military service, members of Royal Canadian Legion Branch 43 in Port Hawkesbury offered a military service not unlike those seen on November 11th to mark Remembrance Day every year. Elements of this Monday morning service included the last post, and just as bagpipes were prominent in the Queen's final arrangements over in the United Kingdom, so they were heard on the streets of Port Hawkesbury on this Monday morning, playing the lament so often heard at Remembrance Day ceremonies. And with Branch 43's Sergeant-at-Arms, Derny Gillis, leading the way, the branch's colour party lifted their flags as Reveille was played.
We will remember them.
Only a few moments later, Branch 43's second Vice President, Marguerite Howlett, laid a wreath at the Port Hawkesbury cenotaph in honour of the memory of Queen Elizabeth II. However, even with all of this reverence for the late Queen, there was an acknowledgement that the legacy of the British monarchy is a complicated one in terms of Canadian culture and history. To that end, the branch's chaplain, Wayne Urquhart, offered a prayer that not only saluted the life and legacy of the late Queen, but paid respect to those who feel they have been wronged by colonialism over the decades and the centuries.
We give thanks for the life of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, who is now gathered among the faithful who go before us. May we bless and keep all who love and who all will miss Queen Elizabeth. We pray especially for the royal family and all who hold her closely in their hearts, and all who will shepherd nations of people in the grieving process. May you bless and keep the Commonwealth and all who wrestle with the complexities of the monarchy and what Queen Elizabeth represents. We pray especially for those who continue to unpack the legacies of colonialism as we work towards the right relations and reconciliation. We bring all this to you while giving thanks for the life of Queen Elizabeth and while celebrating your sovereignty over your hearts. Amen.
And as the Legion's Zone 3 commander John Langley pointed out, this is also a time of transition as both Britain and the Commonwealth welcome the new King, Charles III.
With the succession of the King, the Legion ties to the monarchy and the Commonwealth will remain strong and will be embodied by His Majesty's representative in Canada, Her Excellency, the Right Honourable Mary May Simon, the current Vice-Regal Patron of the Legion. We will remember Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
And now as we come to continue to celebrate the life and the ending of the reign of our Queen, we also come together to celebrate the beginning of the reign of King Charles III. And we join together in our loyalty to him as our sovereign, and by our singing together, God Save the King.
And then, on a sunny Monday morning in Port Hawkesbury, came the first singing of God Save the King in nearly 70 years in a public space in the Strait of Canso.
Send him victorious, happy and glorious, long to reign over us. God save the King.
3, rolling, curtain.
And with the ceremonies complete on this holiday Monday morning in Port Hawkesbury, members of Royal Canadian Legion Branch 43 made their way back across Reeve Street to the Port Hawkesbury Legion Hall. They had tea and cake in honour of Queen Elizabeth II, but they and those in attendance at the Port Hawkesbury cenotaph on this Monday morning knew that things were changing not only in the United Kingdom, but throughout Canada and for the Commonwealth as a whole. In Port Hawkesbury, for Telile 24/7, I'm Adam Cook. Now, if you watched last week's edition of Telile 24/7, you might remember that I sat down in the Telile studios with Richmond County's new Chief Administrative Officer, Troy McCulloch. Well, just a few days after we recorded that interview, McCulloch and his Richmond Council colleagues were busy overseeing the new Committee of the Whole session for Richmond Municipal Council in Arishat. And one of the issues discussed during that council meeting was the idea of taking 2 digital speed radar signs and moving them to different parts of Richmond County to make sure that people are obeying the speed limit in different communities. How did that conversation go? Let's take a look right now.
So we do have the speed radar signs here, so that's exciting. And I guess at this point we need to consider locations for them.
I give you 3 right off the bat. I know originally I brought it up because my District 2 has been hounding me on the school side and coming into the West Area side. So again, I can only tell you that I get phone calls and emails every day coming through, especially coming down the, I guess over the hill into schools before you get to the hall seems to be the fly zone. West Area coming in just before you get to, again, McCacker's Road, coming into West Area where the reduction in speed seems to be a fly zone. But
and when we originally discussed it, right, it was certainly some concerns that residents had regarding the school zone, the high school in particular by the arena, and then also a residential area where students tend to congregate at lunchtime. And I think that if we sat around, we could probably all come up with a list of 2 or 3 places in our district where we'd love to see them. And I think that's why we got 2, so we could circulate them. So I'm wondering if it may make more sense for us to consider a list of each of our districts, send that forward to Troy, and then maybe we could just do, draw straws for whose district gets to use them first. We may be better off to think about how long we want them to sit in a spot and then come up with our list, because I think that's going to be part of the issues too, right? And we did talk about only getting 2 because we could move them around, and that they're more effective that way, like after a certain period of time, they're less effective. So just a suggestion on my part.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, no, I think we should go in numerical order.
Oh, it's me that brought it to council and got it on the budget.
What? No. It's just a suggestion. I'm not, I won't put that motion forward right away. But
Starting with the highest number?
did you say we have 2 sets?
We have 2 signs.
Do we have 2 or 2 sets?
They're not a set. They're
Right, so
individuals. Is that correct, Chris?
Works for me.
Yeah, they work independently. Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't, like, a lot of the places we see them have,
One on either
each,
side.
But you don't necessarily have to do that. If you have,
No.
you may be talking about an area where the speeding issue is predominantly from one direction.
right. Yes, exactly.
So,
Yeah, I am for sure. Like in both of the areas I would think of, one would do the trick.
Yeah.
Right? It's about leaving the school and about heading up.
I'm gonna get myself in trouble here. I don't know who did bring it up originally, but I would think whoever did should probably get them first.
Wrong answer. Oh, yes.
I didn't even go back to the message.
All right. Well, I do think just, maybe in fairness, why don't we submit,
That's a great idea.
if we think there's locations in our districts where they're needed, let's submit those through you, Troy, if that's
Yes, please.
okay. And maybe indicate if you think 1 or 2 would do the trick in terms of those locations.
Maybe
Okay?
we can come up with at the same time a time frame where we think is,
Yeah.
1 month, 2 months, 3 months.
Yeah.
Again, it's no good to just put it in a school zone when they're out.
That's right.
No.
So to have it, you know what I mean? It's just,
Yep.
But we do have them, and they'll calculate. They show you your speed, but they also do a traffic count, which is really great for us to be able to kind of maybe create some data. Some data for work on roads, et cetera, right? So. For the our provincial and federal partners. So maybe we could ask you to do that as quickly as possible, because we have them. We might as well have them up.
Now, speaking of being on the road, that will likely be a little more expensive for Richmond County residents and people across Nova Scotia and Canada in the new year. That's because the federal government has announced that it is going to impose a 14-cent per litre carbon tax on Nova Scotians beginning in January 2023, as a result of the provincial government's failure to be able to submit a different proposal to reduce carbon emissions in the province. So why is the provincial government taking such a hard line against carbon taxes? To get the answer, I spoke to Nova Scotia's Finance Minister and Deputy Premier, as well as the MLA for Inverness, Allan MacMaster. Here's the first part of our 2-part interview dealing specifically with carbon taxes and green energy prospects for Nova Scotia. And to address a couple of issues that have come up on the provincial scene, we're pleased to welcome the MLA for Inverness, Nova Scotia's Finance and Treasury Board Minister, and the Deputy Premier of Nova Scotia. He is, of course, Allan MacMaster. Allan, thank you for joining me today on Telile 24/7.
Great to be with you, Adam.
Good to have you back, and we wanted you here for two main reasons. The first of which is that your government recently attempted to work with the federal government in terms of submitting a plan for reduction of Nova Scotia's carbon footprint that would not involve carbon taxes being imposed. The federal government rejected that plan, and we are going to see carbon taxes imposed on the gas prices that will be charged to Nova Scotians as early as this January. You have some concerns about that. They are concerns shared by your government. Can you give us a sense of why you are concerned about the imposition of a 14-cent carbon tax?
Well, the quickest thing I can say about it is it's going to raise the cost of everything for people. There is the immediate cost of when you go to fill your car or truck up at the gas pump, you're going to be paying 14 cents more per liter. But then we know that we know all too well the last few months, when the price of fuel goes up, so does the price of everything else. So 14 cents is not a small amount. It's a significant increase. And we just don't feel it's necessary to tax people for the purposes of trying to make changes that will help our planet. So we've tried to communicate that to the federal government. We've done a lot in this province. People, when I look back to around the year 2010, power rates started to rise. They actually went up about 25% in 3 or 4 years. And a lot of that had to do with the addition of windmills at the time. And wind power has since come down significantly in price. But back then, the technology was newer, there were fewer of them around, and the price per kilowatt hour was higher. And as a result, people's power bills rose significantly. People in Nova Scotia ended up having to pay significant increases in their power bills at that time. And in fact, that's why for the last 3 years, the previous provincial government had a deal with the federal government whereby they basically didn't have to do anything for carbon taxes in the last 3 years, because the federal government recognized that Nova Scotians already did pay a price when we added that renewable energy onto our grid back then. But the end of that agreement is coming at the end of December. And as soon as we go into January, the federal government wants a carbon tax in place. And even though we've submitted a plan to them that shows we're going to continue to move away from fossil fuel-based power generation, and there'll be a natural, I think, over time, a movement towards electric cars and away from fossil fuel powered cars, that does not seem good enough for them. They still want a carbon tax in place. So that's why we've been talking about this. And quite frankly, I don't think people out there want an extra 14-cent cost per liter when they buy gasoline.
Can we speak as well, Allan, to the concept that this could bring up the price of home heating oil, which is already a spot where many people have to make a decision between whether they're going to be able to buy groceries or pay the rent or pay for home heating oil? Is this a concern that you're hearing on the ground floor, not only provincially, but in your riding of Inverness?
Well, if I'm not hearing it now, I can guarantee you I will hear it in January. Because you're right, it's not just on gasoline, it's on all other fossil fuels. The amounts are different based on the carbon intensity of the fuel. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but for home heating oil, it would be an amount comparable, maybe even a bit higher than 14 cents per liter. And it's going to affect anybody who is using fossil fuels. And there's a lot of people, 40% of Nova Scotians heat with home heating oil. And it is what it is. That's what people have chosen to use, maybe because for whatever reason in the past, it was cheaper than electric heat. For whatever reason, that's the reality. 40% of Nova Scotians heat with furnace oil. And most people can't just turn on a dime and say, I'm going to get rid of my furnace, even though it might have 10 years of use left in it. Most people can't say, I'm going to get rid of that furnace and put in a new form of heating that's less carbon based so that I can insulate myself. So really, this carbon tax, it's actually going to hurt people who are the least able to make changes in how they live. And if I might expand a little more,
Sure.
most people in this province don't have access to public transit. They have to drive to work. So, you've got to drive to work. Half of us are heating our homes with furnace oil right now. And many people can't just turn on a dime and change that. So the carbon tax is going to hurt those people more.
Allan, can I pick up on a point you made just a couple of moments ago about the timeline of your government's and the previous Liberal government's negotiations with the federal government on all of this? There has been some criticism lobbied at your administration by opposition politicians and others that the provincial government dragged its feet on presenting a final plan for reducing Nova Scotia's carbon footprint to the federal government, and did it just days before the September 1st deadline. How do you respond to that? Is that a fair assessment?
I can tell you this is something I've been working on since pretty well last year this time. Maybe it was a bit later in the fall, but because while it's not directly under the Department of Finance, certainly the economic ramifications to the economy would be a concern to the Department of Finance. People are spending more on, and this is of course before Russia invaded Ukraine, and we've seen our gas prices explode. That impacts the economy, and so at the Department of Finance, and because this is a tax, a carbon tax, we have a role to play in Nova Scotia's response to it. So I can tell you, this isn't something we were dragging our feet on. We've been working at this for the past year, and I know there's been a lot of communication between the federal government and the provincial government through our departments of environment. So while the plan may have been submitted, what some people might refer to as last minute, I would also say it was submitted before the deadline. And so if somebody asks you to do your homework and get it in by the deadline, we got it in by the deadline. So, and there was communications all the way through. I know that for a fact. And this is probably, I will say, easily one of the top three issues I've worked on since I've been appointed as minister in this government.
Now, you've brought up, and your government has brought up, a number of other ways that Nova Scotia is trying to address its carbon footprint. Yeah, you mentioned wind energy, and I know that is something that a local company, Everwind Fuels, is working on in Point Tupper. We had the CEO of the company on the show last week talking about that. All that being said, what happens if negotiations fail with the federal government and we do see that carbon tax imposed? Is your government willing to consider rebates of any sort, either for home heating oil or for the price of gasoline? Could the province consider lowering its portion of taxes collected on gasoline at the pumps? Essentially, what happens if the federal government goes ahead? What can the provincial government do in a case like that?
We have looked at every scenario, including if the federal government chooses to go ahead. And I can't speak in any detail on that, and it's really being led by the Minister of Environment, but you can expect we've done our homework.
We'll hear more from Finance Minister Allan MacMaster about a separate issue later on in this edition of Telile 24/7. Right now, let's go to Mulgrave, where there's a new rainbow crosswalk installed near a local park to show support to the LGBTQIA and Two-Spirit communities in Mulgrave and the surrounding areas. It's the brainchild of a youth representative on Mulgrave Town Council. She's a junior high student from the town named Victoria Cook. Here's her story, and here's her recollections of what it was like to work with Municipal Council over the past year on projects such as the new Rainbow Crosswalk near McNair's Cove Park.
It was about October of 2021. Councillor Krista Luddington reached out to just Mulgrave in general. She posted it on the Facebook page for it, and I saw it and I thought, that's interesting. I like helping people. I've always wanted to do a little bit of activism and human rights and stuff, so I figured, why not try this out, see how I like it. So I sent in my resume and I sent in my cover letter of why I wanted to do it, some ideas I had, and just some different things that I think Mulgrave could do better, Mulgrave could change.
While Cook was the only applicant for the youth representative position, that wound up working to her advantage, as she was able to advocate her own positions while learning how to work with elected officials.
It was like me alone, so it felt a little bit easier to work for myself than have to, I know it sounds bad, but to have to work with a whole group of people who may have different views than myself. But Councillor Krista was very open to any ideas and suggestions I had. She had asked me to go to my school or go around Mulgrave to the youth and ask some things they would like to change. The things I got in response were out of budget, I'll put it that way. They were expensive. Like, I had somebody ask for a new four-wheeler trail. I had somebody ask to pave the trails that are around Mulgrave. Like, that stuff, I totally get it because it makes it more accessible, but it wasn't easy to do. It was very expensive. So I came up with the idea, what about a Pride crosswalk? And Councillor Krista she loved the idea. So after a lot of work with her, talking to council and making sure they were okay with me coming in, giving my idea, I went to a council meeting around December, maybe? November, December. And they asked me what my idea was, and I gave a speech about what I wanted to do, why it was important to me. And I had every single person on the council say yes.
Mulgrave councillors' unanimous approval was gratifying to Victoria Cook, especially since this was her first time ever addressing a municipal council meeting.
It was nerve-wracking, but it felt good. It felt like something I've wanted to do for a long time, and it felt good to finally acknowledge that, wow, I can actually do something. I can make a change. I can make a difference.
If you thought Victoria Cook had personal or advocacy reasons for getting a rainbow crosswalk on this section of Main Street in Mulgrave, you'd be right. But she was also thinking in practical terms about the condition of the crosswalk near McNair's Cove Park.
This crosswalk was very worn off. It was very not noticeable anymore. People wouldn't stop at it as much, and I thought repainting it at the least, redoing the roads at the least. But I've got a wide range of close friends and family who are in the LGBTQIA community, and myself included. And I thought, why not do this? Port Hawkesbury did it. Other places have done it. Mulgrave can do it too. It just takes a little bit of money. And we got that money.
Cook was hoping to see the Rainbow Crosswalk take shape before the traditional Scotia Days festival held in Mulgrave every July. However, expenses and delays prevented that from happening, and as bad luck would have it, Cook was out of town when the actual painting took place on August the 17th. However, she got some pleasant surprises when she found out how the crosswalk came together while she was away.
I wasn't actually in Mulgrave. I was at my camp, my summer camp at the time, and I didn't have my phone. I wasn't allowed technology, anything like that. It would have been nice to be here to actually paint it, but I had a lovely group of volunteers who volunteered and took their time out of the day and did this and made my dream come true with the Pride Crosswalk. After I got home and finally saw it, I felt a sense of relief, because the original plan was to get it done before Scotia Days, which didn't happen. It's expensive. The paint is very expensive. But I finally felt like, okay, I feel a little bit more accepted. And another whole idea behind it was for people coming into Mulgrave to feel accepted, to feel, oh, well, I'm okay here, I'm safe here. So it was pretty much a big feeling of relief.
So has this experience with municipal politics changed Victoria Cook's view of her hometown?
Mulgrave, it's always been kind of a quiet place, and I feel like everybody here is very accepting. Everybody here is very understanding, will help you with what you need. We're like one big family here. It's a small place, so everybody knows everybody and everybody will help everybody. So I feel like it kind of I know even though it's small and it's a small gesture, it kind of shows that Mulgrave is an accepting, opened, welcoming place, and that there's people here who are safe to confide and people here are safe to talk to, and it's just a place where you won't be ridiculed and judged for who you are.
During her time as Mulgrave Council's youth representative over the past year, Victoria Cook has also pitched putting some new paint designs on the town's Royal Canadian Legion branch. However, she's hoping her influence and that of other young people in Mulgrave will go far beyond what things might look like on the outside.
I'm not going to stick to, oh my gosh, we have to paint everything. But I'm going to stick to making a change and making it different for people to feel more welcomed and to feel more comfortable. Because I feel that the council's already involved in fixing the roads, fixing the buildings, fixing taxes, anything like that. But I feel like as a youth person, as a teenager, there's other things that the adults won't be able to understand the same. I feel like people approach me differently than they would for the adults, and so I can help understand it and I can bring it back in a way that seems acceptable to the council and seems professional, more than if a kid just went up to them and started talking about something they wanted to change.
So what does the future hold for Victoria Cook? Well, in the immediate future, she's going to be applying again to be Mulgrave's youth representative when the position comes up in October, and she's even looking beyond that to perhaps running as a town councillor as an adult.
I can see it. I honestly can. I've wanted to, because for me as a person, I like to make a difference. I like to make a change. I want to be involved in activism as an adult, even as a teenager. I've already started trying to get people to be more accepting and more understanding. I've been to multiple parades, multiple protests, and I can see myself, yes, being a town councillor or something like that.
Whatever happens, Victoria Cook knows she'll always be grateful for the Mulgrave Town councillors and town residents who took the desire of a junior high school student to have a rainbow crosswalk seriously.
I just want to thank everybody who put in the effort and put in their time and took time out of their day to help me with this. Even though a kid's dream might seem kind of silly, and to some people just seeing this, they might think, oh, it's kind of silly that this crosswalk paint on a road feels so sentimental, but it's, again, a very close thing to my heart.
And you'll hear a little more from Victoria Cook later on in this episode as she plays Telile 24/7's infamous Fast 5 game. But for now, let's return to Richmond Council's recent Committee of the Whole meeting, and specifically a discussion on increasing broadband internet access for Richmond County residents. Recently, the county formed a partnership with Inverness County and 2 local Mi'kmaq communities to make a pitch to the federal government for funding to enable this goal to be reached. However, the federal government has rejected this plan, so Richmond Council is now looking at other ways that it can access funds to bring more digital access to community residents around the county. Here's the discussion on that project right now.
Our federal funding application was denied for the joint project with Inverness County and First Nations to kind of do that coverage in the southern end of the Boudreau Lake, which would have covered our Dundee, West Bay kind of area, which is really unfortunate. According to our last update from Develop Nova Scotia, there will be less than 100 people in Richmond County still not served with broadband at the end of their projects, which I think is end of 2023. Quote me on that, I'd have to double check. At the end of the day, we still do have a broadband and a cellular problem in the current, in the now. And so after speaking with MP Kellaway, he suggested that it might be helpful if we wrote a letter of support to him, encouraging the federal government to recapitalize the Universal Broadband Fund so that we can continue to make application under that fund, because these towers are difficult for certainly municipalities our size to finance on our own.
I think it's one of the biggest things we all hear, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think we want to let our foot off the gas if at all possible.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Mm-hmm. So we should write a letter if that's what MP Kellaway felt would maybe help at all. So I would say yes, you should write a letter on behalf of council, and yes, staff should continue to investigate areas. It's certainly a big issue.
We had a meeting, I think 2 weeks ago, and it was all the CAOs in the Quad counties, and it was brought up then that it wasn't just the broadband, it's the cellular as well, and that we need to get the letter going. We were expecting something from Antigonish first to come across the causeway to us to have a look at. That has not come yet. So, but it's along the same lines as what we're doing with the minister, so I think we're just ahead of the game there.
At the request of Warden Mumberket, Richmond Council will write to Cape Breton-Canso Member of Parliament Mike Kellaway concerning recapitalization of the Universal Broadband Fund, and staff will continue to look for other partnership options to expand broadband access in Richmond County and beyond. Well, summer has officially dissolved into the fall, and it's been a very different summer from the last two. Because COVID-19 restrictions were lifted in Nova Scotia on March 21st, a lot of summer programs, activities, and events were able to proceed that weren't able to happen the previous 2 years. One of the biggest of these was activities at Camp Rankin, located just north of Sampsonville in the community of Cape George. As a matter of fact, not only did Camp Rankin hold its regular camp and its smaller week-long camps for the first time in 3 years, but the camp also celebrated its 50th anniversary of being an official Nova Scotia 4-H facility. To get the skinny on what this means for people going back to camp this summer for various reasons, I headed up to Camp Rankin on the last weekend of August and spoke to several people who were taking part in a reunion of the Burke family that has proceeded after being shut down for the previous 2 summers. Let's take a run up to Camp Rankin right now. We haven't seen scenes like this at Camp Rankin over the past 3 years due to COVID-19 restrictions. But thanks to the lifting of those restrictions province-wide on March 21st, the Burke family, who have been enjoying their reunions here since 1999, have come out to play once again.
To put it in one word, wow. Yeah, so much family. I mean, I knew I married into a big family, but when you see them all here gathered together, it's like, wow.
When it's a big family, you don't do as much together sometimes as smaller families because you can't all get together. There's too many of us. So the camp is the perfect spot for us.
It's exciting every year. It's just like Christmas to me. Yeah, it is. It is. I love it so much.
Along with the Burke family, Christmas came early for thousands of other young people from across Atlantic Canada this summer, and for the Camp Rankin organizers who have been running this facility since it began as a centennial project in 1967. After 2 summers' worth of COVID freeze-outs, Camp Rankin reopened to the public in July, holding weekly junior camps and then holding its main camp in July and August. Seeing the camp reopen for not only 4-H activities, but also for events like the Burke family reunion was special for some of the family members that have come from across Cape Breton on this final weekend of August. Some of them have been campers themselves here at this facility.
I actually came here as a 4-H camper.
So what does Gillian Burke, now Gillian Poirier, remember about that early Camp Rankin experience? Well, the answer might surprise you.
Rain. It rained the whole week we were here. Oh. But we had so much activity in the gym that they set up for us. It was fun. Fun, yeah.
Some of us came as campers, well, not to this camp, but some of us were 4-H campers. I think maybe some of the nieces or nephews did come as campers, 4-H campers. So
did that make it a natural fit to have a reunion here?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that would have maybe had something to do with it. And actually, we came when we were kids. With the original building, when we were teenagers, me, my sisters, a few other friends from Sampsonville, we came here to spend the night in the camp while it was being built. So, and that was a lot of fun. That was fun. We were here on our own, so that made it more fun. First time to be allowed to be on our own for the night with a group of friends. Yeah, wonderful. And we didn't burn the place down.
Camp Rankin memories are also flooding back this summer, both at the Burke family reunion and around the camp facility in Cape George, because in 1972, 4-H officials in Nova Scotia recognized the camp as a 4-H facility for the first time. That means it's the 50th anniversary of Camp Rankin's use as a 4-H facility. It's also the 100th anniversary of the 4-H movement in Canada, and that's bringing a lot of smiles to the people who are here for this Burke family reunion on the final weekend of August.
Awesome. Awesome. Just incredible. I love it. It's my favorite week of the year.
I have 3 kids, so I have, a 7-year-old, 5, and a 2, so just having them here and being with all their family and cousins, and they just have a ball. Well, actually, this is my first time ever coming together as a family. So with the Burke family, it's a big family, so it's really nice to be around and see everybody once a year and make time. So
in the summer of 2019, the Burke family gathered here for their 20th anniversary of their annual reunions, not knowing what was to come only a few months down the road as COVID-19 swept through the world and swept through Nova Scotia.
I'm so glad we did that big family get together in 2019. That was the 20th anniversary, right? Yeah. So we're so glad we got that one in, because when you couldn't do it the next one, it was like the bubble busted. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't fun. I just wanted that year to get over and say, okay, we'll go next year. But then the next year came again and we couldn't come again. And I said, oh my God, we better be able to go to next year because I don't know what I'm going to do.
Oh, it was so disappointing. I mean, we had come for 20 years in a row, and to think we couldn't come back again. Everybody looks forward to it. All the kids love it. They have so much fun, and we just love seeing them have so much fun, and we enjoy it too. Yeah, it's great.
We look forward every year, and the kids would get so excited that would be here at camp, and they would be like, I can't wait till next year. And then when COVID came and we couldn't come, it was, really disappointing. Very, for everybody.
Yeah, it's just not the same, when you have everybody together and just share memories and stuff. So it was nice to come back and do it again.
And today, as the summer of 2022 draws to a close and Camp Rankin looks back on a successful 50th anniversary year, including a special year for the Burke family, the folks behind this long-running Cape Breton family gathering are now pleased to be able to pass this tradition on to their children, grandchildren, and in some cases, great-grandchildren.
My kids, our kids were so much smaller, and to have them here, was... And all the games we'd play, because we'd do lots of games outside, and we'd have,
We were the adults, and our kids were the children. Now we have children, we have grandchildren, we have great-grandchildren, some of us. So it's amazing.
And as the Burkes and their family matriarch watch over the fun during this long-awaited family reunion,
I'm just the cause of all this, that's all.
Bernice Burke and 3 generations of her relatives from around Cape Breton Island are hopeful that this summer's family reunion marks the continuation of the legacy of Camp Rankin for another 50 years and beyond. At Cape George, for Telile 24/7, I'm Adam Cook. And as promised, here's the second part of our interview with Deputy Premier, Finance Minister, and Inverness MLA Allan MacMaster. This time we're talking about the recent release of Nova Scotia's public accounts for 2021-22, a release that included a surprise surplus when the original projection was to have a deficit of several $100 million. How did that happen? Well, here's the Finance Minister to talk about it.
It's certainly a positive story for all of us in Nova Scotia. And I say positive because it is a clear reflection that when the previous Liberal government was putting the budget together back in the spring of, well, they would have started probably back in 2020 around this time, but they would have introduced the budget in the spring of 2021. Of course, the election was in August, and then we took office in September of last year. So it was a surprise, but it's a good news surprise because it is a reflection that the economy actually was healthier than was predicted. So we actually, the deficit was projected to be over 500 million, and it's come in terms of a surplus at about 350 million. So to finish off the year that ended on March of this year, the government has taken in $350 million surplus. Now, some people have said, well, how come you didn't know that would happen? Well, we do forecasts every 3 months, every quarter, and the information we get helps us, and it's always trailing information. We don't get it. We don't have it today. We get it, 3 months from now or 4 months from now in some cases. You may recall last December, I was reporting an extra $1 billion in revenue. That the provincial Liberal government in the spring of 2021 didn't know that was happening, and shouldn't be faulted for it either, quite frankly. But we got information from Statistics Canada in November that updated our models, and it showed that we actually had an extra $1 billion in revenue. And when we that set us up, I'll get all the numbers mixed up now, but and then come the spring, it looked like we had which put us in a better financial position. And then in the spring, when we introduced the provincial budget, we thought we would close the last year with $107 million surplus. Now, as of the announcement last week, it's actually a $350 million surplus. So a lot of numbers here. I think if I could sort of summarize it for your listeners, it's good news because it's a sign that the economy did better than expected. And as a result, the government took in more tax revenues than expected. Should we have spent the money? Well, we didn't know we had it until last week. And it automatically goes on the debt. So that's not a bad thing. It puts our province in a better state. We have less debt going forward. And we're into a new year now as of April 1st. And this year we're planning to deficit spend. So we're not going to have a surplus this year. We're going to spend more than we're taking in. So if there's anybody out there feels we should have spent the $350 million, in a way we're spending it this year because we're projected to spend well over $500 million more than we're taking in. So, and we will have a forecast update for you, I'd say in the next couple of weeks. And we'll be able to tell you where we are on track this year, if it's still looking like we're going to overspend by $500+ million. All
right. Well, we're looking forward to seeing what happens in that update. And just to go back to your discussion on the idea that a surplus automatically goes to the deficit, because there were some opposition politicians and others suggesting, well, if you have hundreds of millions of dollars extra, you should be putting it towards healthcare, you should be putting it towards education or housing. Yeah. But the concept, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, for years has been that if it's put on the debt, that lowers the annual cost of debt servicing by the provincial government, and that frees up more revenue to be able to spend on these priority areas. Is that the current case?
You're absolutely right. That is the case. If we're carrying less debt, there's less interest cost to carry it. It's no different than a mortgage or a car loan. And I mean, at the end of the day, we want to make spending decisions based on the information we have. And we're always going to see adjustments. That's why we do forecast updates every 3 months to keep the public aware and to ensure that it's transparent and people know what's going on. So we always want to make spending decisions with good information. We want to be prudent, but we've also shown as a government that we're willing to spend, and we're focused on healthcare. The last budget, we're spending a significant increase over the previous government. We're spending 10% more on the healthcare system itself outside of COVID costs. So that's a significant increase to the health budget. So we're willing to spend the money, but we will always aim to do so in a way that's prudent, because if you have money just to go and spend it because you think you have some extra money, I think we need to be a little more sophisticated than that. We want to plan our expenditure and make sure we're investing the public's money in a way that we're going to get some good results for them, because it's not my money. I might be the finance minister, but the money doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the public.
All right. We have covered a lot of ground in a very short time, Allan, and I appreciate you giving me some time here to talk about all these issues. Did you want to add anything else about any of this just before we wrap up?
No, I think we've covered it in quite some detail there, and it's always good to be with you here, and I just want to wish your listeners well.
I know, of course, your plate is piled high as always, Deputy Premier, Finance Minister, and Treasury Board Minister, and of course, the MLA for one of the biggest geographical ridings in Nova Scotia in Inverness. Allan MacMaster, thank you for giving us some time here on Telile 24/7 today.
You're most welcome, Adam. Take care.
Regular viewers of Telile 24/7 might remember that not that long ago, we focused on the Babbins Hill Look-Off in Isle Madame, and specifically on a municipal councillor's desire to increase access to this look-off and also make it safer for drivers heading through the area between West Arishat and Arishat. The topic came up again at the most recent Committee of the Whole meeting of Richmond Council, as CAO Troy McCulloch was speaking with Michael Digdon, the councillor for District 2, to get a better sense of what was needed for that particular look-off. Here's that conversation right now, beginning with remarks from CAO Troy McCulloch.
Just looking for clarity on what it was exactly you were looking for, and to make all of council aware of the maps that were done during, I believe it was the 2015 rec plan as well. It laid out some ideas for development in this area, and I was wondering if you were referring to some of that, because then we can build off of those diagrams. Because we went out and looked at the site as well, and going on one direction it's too steep, like back towards here it's just way too steep, but heading back towards West Arishat,
towards the intersection,
that's right, there is room to work there. So we were just looking for some clarity from you so that as we dig into this, we're going in the right direction and we're on the same page. That's all.
Right, and that's exactly what I actually took Councillor Sampson to show him back several months, and then I had discussion with transportation, just to, and again, transportation seems to have no issues with the
right away
or anything at all. And we own, I believe, right up to the intersection, so we can come back as far as deemed fit or deemed feasible. My deal was just to increase the lot and the look-off.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Troy, I mean, where the lot is at now and where the picnic area, it's just a cliff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think going more towards the intersection and the stop sign would be more of an option to expand and be safer for more people, right? That are stopping there to view it, right?
The only question I would have before staff spends any great amount of time on this, right, is this something that, and again, I mean no disrespect when I'm asking the question, is this a real problem? Do we find ourselves that the look-off has too many cars at any given time to accommodate them? Like, I don't travel very often.
So it's the other way. The people, if there's one or two cars, the other people will continue to go, but they'll slow down and try and look over. And there's just, even the picnic area, it's used daily.
Okay.
But like throughout the whole day, there's probably 15, 20 people that are sitting there, and then 2 or 3 now and 2 or 3 in an hour and 2 or 3. It would increase the chance of somebody stopping and taking a look or doing it's one of the only great look-off spots we have on the island. The lighthouse is right across. It's open to the harbor and open to the ocean. It's just to increase the tourist perspective, I guess.
Yeah, certainly not questioning how lovely the look-off is. I've stopped there myself in Headland.
Unfortunately, there's only really room for 2 cars and there's one picnic table, so it
So we'll take a look and bring back the recommendations from the 2015 report as well. That was part of that blue canoe thing. I think it was done under the wayfinding and making sites within our community. So that'll be one that we can look at. I think we know the direction and what the end goal is at this point, and I think it is. It's to increase the usage and the footprint of the area. I like the idea of the traffic aspect as well, because I do find myself rubbernecking at that place sometimes, because if there are too many vehicles, I will keep driving, but I still find myself trying to look out there as well. So it's a good idea.
And of course, we couldn't finish up Telile 24/7's 100th episode without another edition of the Fast Five. Here we are talking to the youth representative for Mulgrave Town Council, Victoria Cook, at McNair's Cove Park in Mulgrave. And now we're joined by the youth representative for Mulgrave Town Council. She is Victoria Cook, and she is going to play Telile's world-famous Fast Five game. Are you all set to play the Fast Five, Victoria?
Sure.
That's the spirit. Okay, here we go. First question, Coke or Pepsi?
Pepsi.
All right, we'll forgive you for that one. What is your dream vacation?
Colombia and Hawaii.
Why Colombia and Hawaii?
I love Spanish. and Hawaii is a place full of beaches.
That is fantastic. Good for you. You're the first person to ever say Columbia on this show, so congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. Next question. I have seen this movie 12 times. I would gladly watch it another 100. What is that movie?
Home Alone.
The first one?
All of them.
All of them.
All the time.
So Home Alone binge party at Victoria's place. That's fantastic. Now, you could be one animal for one day. What is that animal?
Horse, 100%.
I should have suspected horse would be your answer. Would you be a horse that would play with the other horses?
Yeah, 100%.
All right.
Be friendly.
Good stuff. Victoria likes horses. And, to put it mildly, that's like saying I like oxygen. And last question on the Fast Five. Would you rather be a forest or a tree?
A forest.
Why a forest?
Because I wouldn't be lonely and I'd be with people. Or trees.
You'd be with other trees, and maybe some horses would come in and play amongst the trees.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's marvelous. See, that wasn't so hard. Congratulations. You have now passed the Fast Five. Thanks, Victoria.
Thank you.
Victoria Cook is the youth representative for Mulgrave Town Council, and she is the latest volunteer for the Telile 24/7 Fast Five. And there you have it, folks. That wraps up our 100th edition of Telile 24/7. Thanks so much for tuning in, and a big thank you to all those who have joined us since our very first show in February 2020. We're looking forward to our next 100 episodes of Telile 24/7, and we appreciate those of you who have been so happy with us during the first 100 episodes. And, as always, I'd like to thank my interview guests, Allan MacMaster, Victoria Cook, and the Burke family members who were gathered at the reunion at Camp Rankin in August. Special thanks to my Telile colleagues who have filmed and formatted the municipal council footage you saw this week, Becky, Bourinot, Nick Boudreau, and Callen, Cowan. If you have any thoughts about what you've seen over the past hour, or you'd just like to make suggestions for the next 100 episodes of Telile 24/7, I'd love to hear from you. You can contact me directly. As always, my phone number is 902-625-8863, and you can reach me by email using the address adamjrcook, cook with an E, @gmail.com. You can also contact Telile Community Television directly with your ideas and thoughts. You can reach the station in Arishat by phoning 902-226-1928, and the best email address to use is telile@telile.tv. Don't forget to follow Telile on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, and our YouTube channel features all 100 episodes of Telile 24/7, including this one, as well as interviews and features from our individual shows. And you can check out our sister programs as well, The Front Porch and Roundtable. I'm Adam Cook. It's been a great pleasure for me to be your host through the first 100 editions of Telile 24/7. We start our next 100 shows next week with a brand new episode. Bye for now, and thanks again.